All right, welcome back to Adobe Lightroom Classic. And Adobe has just released a whole series of new updates in Photoshop and Lightroom. And today we're going to take a look at what is new in Lightroom Classic 2023. And the first thing that we're going to take a look at is just to swap the panels. So basically you can put this panel over here and this panel over here if that's something that you wanted to do. All you need to do is go into your preferences. Now you want to go into the Lightroom preferences. They might be under, I think, the edit menu in a Lightroom Classic for a PC, but this is a Mac. Just make sure you find the preferences. Once you're inside of preferences, go ahead and click on interface. And then right here, you can see there's two different options for swapping the panels, but you can basically click on them. And when you restart, it would switch it. And this panel will be over here and this panel will be over here, if that's something that makes you happy. Otherwise, don't worry about it. I'm not going to touch it. Now, the main new features inside Lightroom both have to do with artificial intelligence. One is a content-aware fill tool, which we'll take a look in a little bit. And the other is people selections and just a variety of new masking options and selections. So I am in the develop module. As you can see up here, I've got develop. So the first option that we have that's new before we get into any of the masking is you'll notice they've added the edit over here on the right-hand side. And before you used to just click on the masking tool, and then if you wanted to get out of it, you had to click it again. Now you can click on the masking tool and then come over here to the edit, click on that, and it takes you back. Both do the exact same thing. They've just added that. That's all that's new. So over here in the selection tool, and this is where most of the new stuff is available. We'll click on this, and as you'll see, this is different looking. We have the addition of select background, which is awesome. So we can use artificial intelligence to select the background. We have a new object selection tool, which we'll take a look at in a little bit. And down here, we have people selection. And this is what we're going to take a look at first here in Lightroom Classic. So I'm going to go ahead and select it. And if you had multiple people, as we'll see later on, multiple faces will show up here that you have the option to select from. I'm going to go ahead and select that. And what we have here is different ways to select our subject. We can select the entire person and go ahead and create a mask. So I can hit create mask. It's going to make just one giant mask. I can make my adjustment. We can do anything to that subject. Now, that's not really any different than we had before when we used select subject. So let's go ahead and go back in time. And this time we're going to select the person, but you'll notice below it, we have the availability to select just the skin, just the body, just the eyebrows, the whites of the eye, the iris and the pupil, the lips, and the hair. So what I can do is select all of these. And instead of creating one mask, I can come down here and create 7 separate masks and then hit create mask. And what does that do? Well, it goes through and creates an individual mask for each one of these different areas. You'll notice that they are labeled mask 1, mask 2. However, if you do click on it, it tells you what it is. So in this case, this is the eyebrows. And if I click on mask 4, this is the whites of the eyes. So we can work on each of those areas individually. So I can come back down here to mask 1 and click on this. This is the skin or the face. So if I wanted to adjust this, just the face, and lighten the face and not lighten any other areas, I can easily come in here and do that. If I wanted to soften her skin tone a little bit, I can reduce the texture to soften that skin. Then I can go up to my next mask, which is the body. And in that case, if I just want to brighten that so it's a little bit closer, we can adjust that area. Now, just because this has made a selection from it, we still have the ability to either add to or subtract from any mask. So for some reason you wanted to not include this arm, you could easily remove that arm from this masking selection. So you can go into each one of these different options and individually make adjustments, and you didn't have to do anything. Lightroom Classic did it all for us. And the cool thing is it's been doing a pretty awesome job at making those selections. So let's come down here to this next image. We're still in the masking or the selection box. So in this case, notice we've got all people where it's going to select everyone, person 1 and person 2. So we can make just a selection of the guy on the right, the woman on the left, or both at the same time. This can be helpful. A lot of times you have people with different complexions. You can see she's sort of washed out. He's not that bad, but she's very washed out in this image. So I can select just her in this case. I'm going to do the entire person in this case. I'm going to go ahead and hit create mask. And I'm just going to lower the contrast and lower the highlights and lower the exposure and try to get her closer to where he should be. If I was being real specific, I would go in here and darken this area as well. He could use a little bit of it, but you get the gist of the idea of what's new in here. We have the ability to use this new portrait selection to easily select out subjects without having to go into using the brush or invert or anything that's very difficult. And the last option that we have here that is still under the selection tool is the background selection tool. So we can click on background selection. It's going to automatically analyze and pick up the background. In this case, we can just blur it out a little bit more if that's something that we want to do. But it's able to select our background using artificial intelligence. If you're finding the information in any of these videos helpful, if you could please give me a thumbs up, that would be wonderful. If you would like to subscribe and get future videos as they come up, because I'm going to be doing a whole series on Lightroom right here, that would be great as well. We can come down here. We can see how it works on a whole bunch of people. You'll notice down here, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. It did not select the dog. So this is where we could use a new option, which is select object. So if I click on select object, it doesn't really create a mask or do anything at this point. But over here, we have this new section that says select objects. And over here, we have something that's very similar to the Photoshop quick selection brush. And what that would mean is you would come over here and I'll reduce the size of my brush. I'm just kind of paint over the dog and say, hey, all you're doing is saying, hey, this is the area I want to select. And you can see Lightroom did a really awesome job at selecting the dog. You can see it got the shadow right there. So if you wanted to subtract that, it's really simple. Hit subtract. You could use the object selection over again. In this case, I'm just going to go ahead and use the brush because it makes my life simpler and easier. And we'll say we don't want any of the shadows selected. And just like that, we have the ability to select the dog using the object selection tool. Now we're going to go back in time just a little bit. And on that object selection tool, you'll also know that there's a rectangle. So we could use a rectangle to just kind of go over the area that we want to select. Still going to analyze it. Look, once again, it's selected too much. We would just subtract that out. No big deal. And then we have a selection and a really, really good selection of this dog. I'm going to go back in time and we're going to take a look at the next tool. And that is going to be under the healing brush or the cloning stamp inside of Lightroom Classic. And those everybody's used before, we have the ability to use a healing brush and a clone stamp. They work okay in Lightroom. I would tell anybody that if you want to do any sort of cloning or stamping, if you have the ability or know how to do it in Photoshop, it is far superior. Well, they've added what is basically the content aware stamp or brush into Lightroom. And same as we did before, we're going to kind of go over and select the area that we want to remove, which is the dog. We can let it go. And just like that, it does its best to remove the dog. Now, if it doesn't do it perfect, you'll notice that up here we have a refresh. So we can hit refresh and it will redo it. We could add to these areas if we wanted to get rid of the shadow as well in this case. And it still didn't do a good area. Or you can come up here and command drag on the photo to select a custom source, meaning you're saying, hey, I want you to replace the dog with this area. On a PC, I'm assuming it's the same thing, just adding the control key instead. So what I'll do is I'll hold that command and I'll come up here and I will select this area and it will take that area and try to replace it with this area. And as you can see, it works, but not so great. Let's go to another image and see if it works any better on. We'll try to take out this tree right here. So So once again, we'll come over here. I'm just going to apply it over this tree. It will remove it. It did an okay job. I will hold that command key and draw an area down, see if it does a better job. And, you know, it did okay. This is what happens. Sometimes you need to go in. I truly think the cloning stamp brush works much better than most of these AI options that you have. And even when I'm in Photoshop, you'll see me doing a combination of maybe the patch tool and the clone stamp tool to remove stuff out. And that was the new content aware removal tool. Worked okay, didn't work perfect. And that's basically what's new in Lightroom Classic for the year 2023.